actually skip to chapter. Actually, hold on. What Darwin? Yeah. Yes. Actually, what I was reading so far. Actually, it was called Terms of Engagement, and if you get a copy from Amazon, you could see it for yourself. I will start with the introduction, and that's page. I think that's yeah. So page 1, introduction, and that's after the introduction is after this terms of engagement, etc. And so yeah, introduction. What kind of theory is the theory of natural selection? So I am going to repeat that. What kind of theory is the theory of natural selection? Introduction. The neo-Darwinian theory of evolution has two distinct but related parts. There's a historical account of the genealogy of species, and there's the theory of natural selection. The main thesis of this book is that natural selection is irredeemably flawed. That's what the book says. However, we have no quarrel to pick with the genealogy of species. It is perfectly possible, in fact, entirely likely that genealogy of species, that GS for sure, is true even if NS is not. So yeah, I would like to repeat that, which is in fact entirely likely that GS, genealogy of species in short, is true even if natural selection, NS for sure, is not. We are thus quite prepared to accept, at least for purposes of the discussion to follow, that most or all species are related by historical descent, perhaps by descent from a common primitive ancestor. Now don't forget, perhaps by descent from a common primitive ancestor, and that, as a rule of thumb, the more similar the phenotypes of two species are, the less remote is the nearest ancestor that they have in common. However, although we take it that GS and NS are independent, so GS, genealogy of species, and NS, natural selection. Just taking a pause here, and yes, natural selection, NS for sure. So, however, although we take it that GS and NS are independent, we do not suppose that they are unconnected. Think of the GS as a tree, or perhaps a bush, that is composed of nodes and paths, paths. P-A-T-H-S, paths. Each node represents a species, and each species is an ancestor of whatever nodes trace back to it. The questions now arise: how did the taxonomy of species get to be the way that it is? What determines which nodes there are and which paths there are between them? In particular, by what process does an ancestor species differentiate into its descendants? These are the questions that Darwin's adaptationism purports to answer. The answer it proposes is that if in the genealogical tree node A traces back to node B, then species B arose from species A by a process of natural selection, and the path between the nodes corresponds to the operation of that process. We will argue that it is pretty clear that this answer is not right. Whatever NS is, it cannot be the mechanism that generates the historical taxonomy of species. Jared Diamond, in his introduction to Mayer 2001, P.X, in parentheses, remarks that Darwin didn't just present a well thought out theory of evolution. Remarks that Darwin didn't just present a well thought out theory of evolution. Most importantly, he also proposed a theory of causation, the theory of natural selection. Well, if we're right, that's exactly what Darwin did not do, or if you prefer, Darwin did propose a causal mechanism for the process of speciation, but he got it wrong. I'm going to repeat that sentence. Well, if we're right, that's exactly what Darwin did not do, or if you prefer, Darwin did propose a causal mechanism for the process of speciation, but he got it wrong. There are certain historical ironies in this, because it is the Darwinian genealogy and not the theory of natural selection that has been the subject of so much political and theological controversy over the last 100 years or so. To put it crudely, what people who do not like Darwinism have mostly objected to is the implication that there's a baboon in the family tree. More precisely, they do not admit to a recent ancestor that they and the baboon have in common. Accordingly, the question doesn't arise for them how the ancestral ape evolved